You're listening to Two in a Bar.
Welcome back to another episode of Two in a Bar. I'm Chris.
And I'm Joe.
Today I'm very excited because this is the first episode where we're going to be talking through a specific piece of music.
It's been a long time coming, hasn't it? When I say a long time, about 4 episodes.
Mate, this is episode 7.
Episode 7 is the first time when you're getting a piece. So
yeah, the first time for any musical content.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So today's piece is going to be Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony.
Sorry, Chris, for a moment I thought you said Second Piano Concerto. Do you know why I might have thought you said that?
Because that's a very famous piece by the same composer.
I mean, it's an irrelevancy, isn't it? Because we're not doing that. I just thought I should point it out because that might be a piece that listeners know very well.
It's very true. It's very true. I mean, spoiler for later, that might be getting a mention later on.
Nice. Because if you're anything like me, you might know the Piano Concerto, but didn't know the symphony.
Sure. So the premise of these episodes talking about music is going to be that it's like a couple of mates. I say like a couple of mates, like we're not actually mates. So we're going to be pretending to be mates, talking over beer about some music. That's the idea, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're podcast colleagues first. I think we both say that. But that is the point, isn't it? Maybe one educating the other about it, which will be very much the case for this episode.
This is it. So we're going to be alternating who talks to the other and kind of tells them about a specific piece. And it's my turn to start. So I'm going to be talking about Rachmaninoff. Next time, who knows what you'll be talking about? Could be anything. But yeah, next episode.
I actually do know what I'll be talking about, but we won't tell them.
Okay.
I know, you know.
Fair enough. Timestamps. If you're listening on YouTube, I will be putting timestamps in the description. So feel free to skip on to a particular section if there's something you're particularly interested. So what we're going to be talking about in relation to this piece is Rachmaninoff in general, just a little bit about his life, the context of this piece, this symphony, when it was written, what was going on with Rachmaninoff at the time. And then we're going to be talking about the actual music. So if there's one of those topics that you want to skip onto, check out the timestamps in the description.
Could miss a lot of gold though, of course. So
that's always the risk, isn't it? Okay, right. So Rachmaninoff's Symphony No.2, Second Symphony in E minor. Do you know this piece?
I've got to be honest, I don't at all. I've heard things about this piece quite a lot.
Yeah.
You know, my dad is a huge fan, for example, and now I've recently been made aware that you're a huge fan.
Yeah, it's one of my favourite pieces. It's certainly top 10. It might even be top 5. I love it. It's great. We'll get on to why in a bit.
That's a huge shout. Top 5 is huge.
I'm genuinely, and I don't mean this in, previous episodes we've talked about some kind of characters that crop up in orchestras who are a bit kind of, don't you know this piece? That's a bit embarrassing. So when I say I'm surprised, I don't mean it that sort of way. I'm just genuinely surprised you've not heard it because, do you know what? I think if you listen to it, you would recognise it. It's that one.
Yeah, now I do recognise it. We'll come on to why I recognise the theme in a minute because I haven't listened to the piece. But I have listened to a version, which we can come on to, can't we?
Sure.
But yeah, you are being exactly what we talked about not being. But that's fine. And if listeners don't know as well, I'm here to tell them that's okay.
It is okay. It's more than okay. So I'm assuming that you've. I think we can take for granted that you've not played it. If you've not listened to it,
I've not. I don't. In fact, I'll be more serious now. I know absolutely nothing about it, and I'd like to find out more.
Excellent. Well, you've come to the right place.
Certainly have.
You're going to ask me if I've played it?
Oh, no, okay. So here it comes. Okay. Obviously, I missed the cue. Let me start again. I've never played it. Chris, whilst we're hovering around the topic, have you ever played lead flute in Rach 2, the symphony?
I have not ever played it.
Oh.
I have conducted it before.
Oh, I'll see you're playing. And I'll raise you conducting. There's no way to go other than saying that I wrote it. There's nothing for me to do, is there? Unless I'm Rachmaninoff, then I've lost that one.
That's
God,
it. So,
what's it like to conduct?
well, funny story. I just did it in a rehearsal once. It was an orchestra that needed a conductor. They were short of a conductor at really short notice, and we're doing a repertoire session on it where they just play through the whole thing like a performance and then do some stuff on it. So I got asked to do it at very short notice, which was pretty nerve-wracking because, as we'll get onto later, it's a big piece. It's like an hour long. It's so much music. But yeah, it was great fun. But the thing about it was the piece actually starts with this really slow, kind of ominous introduction. And this was the first time that I'd conducted an orchestra that played behind the beat. So just off topic for a second, some orchestras, it depends on kind of the standard of the orchestra in general, but also like locations. So notoriously, professional orchestras in Europe, particularly Germany, tend to play very far behind the beat, whereas professional orchestras in places like America, not necessarily so. But quite often, a really, really, really good orchestra will play behind the beat for a number of reasons, like giving more time to react to what the conductor's doing and stuff like that. And even though I'd done quite a bit of conducting before this was the first time I conducted an orchestra that played behind the beat. And so we started off this really slow thing, and I became aware that they were, taking a bit of time, and then I was kind of waiting for them. They were waiting for me. So that this really slow introduction just got slower and slower and slower.
Excellent.
And then I got used to it, and the rest of it was pretty good. But yeah.
Did you
really
tell them
fun.
why? Did you tell them why?
Nah.
Like, did you say,
don't want to let your guard down, do you?
That would really, I know exactly what you mean. And it's funny when you see it, isn't it? Because you see a conductor. So the beat is like the count, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So like when the conductor is waving their baton, that's essentially what the orchestra is watching for a count. And if you see the conductor and the orchestra is playing behind the beat, the conductor looks like they're really out of time, right? Which is really, really strange. And it's particularly strange if you know the piece. Yeah. You're wondering what on earth the conductor's doing, the orchestra, but obviously it's professional orchestras and they give themselves more time to react. And it's very clever.
Absolutely. And on that note, I've always noticed on YouTube quite a lot of videos that people have uploaded of professional orchestras, like really, really good quality things. They've kind of uploaded it and then gone, hang on, the audio and the video are out of sync. Like the sound's like coming at a different time to the conductor's beat, and so they've like moved it to put it in sync with the conductor. And then when it when the camera like shoots like a violinist playing or something like that, the violinist's fingers like completely out of time with the music because they've wrongly tried to sync it up with the conductor.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, look out for that because it's really, really common.
And I think it's really interesting. I know we need to talk about Rachmaninoff. I didn't realize how much. That's the name of the pod. But I didn't realize that geography plays such a big part. So you're saying like in Germany, professional orchestras are much more likely to play the beat behind the beat than they might do in, say, the US.
Yeah, it's just sort of traditions. And a lot of it depends on the specific orchestra, because every orchestra has their own kind of house style that they like to do. And it might be a tradition, that they've played it that way for hundreds of years, and that's been passed on from player to player to generation to generation. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Okay, so Sergei Rachmaninoff was a Russian composer, pianist, and conductor who lived from 1873 to 1943. So as a pianist, which was his primary instrument, he was one of the best in the world at that time, and a big part of his job was performing as a pianist, solo recitals with orchestras, you name it, the works. Did you know, Joe?
Did he have quite big hands? Is that right?
So he was apparently, by all accounts, very tall and had very big hands, which gave him certain advantages with certain aspects of technique for playing the piano.
It is cheating a bit, isn't it? Because
cheating.
No, but all I'm saying, if Peter Crouch is playing up front, you know what's going to happen. Yeah. Right? If there's a height advantage. I mean, so obviously, if Rachmaninoff's got massive hands, obviously he can do more with the piano than the average person.
Accounts of his playing said that he had a lot of clarity, especially over really difficult passages to play. And, places that with other pianists might just mush into a big passage of, fast notes and stuff like that. A lot of clarity in his playing as he kind of hammered it out.
That's interesting, actually, because again, to use the Peter Crouch analogy, apologies if no one knows who he is. When they say he was good with his feet, didn't they? You wouldn't necessarily expect someone with such big hands to have that level of dexterity in their fingers.
True. Chopin, for instance, very dainty.
Exactly. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So, as a conductor who is very well renowned at the time, and a lot of his pieces he conducted the first performance of. He conducted at the Bolshoi Theatre in Moscow, among many other places. As a composer, which is what he's widely known for these days, widely remembered for, other than his piano works, which there are a fair few of, his orchestral large-scale works, there aren't that many. And actually, because of his performing as a pianist and conducting schedule, quite often throughout his life, he was recorded as saying that, he really wanted to spend more time composing and regrets, the schedules and tours and stuff like that, and just wanted to compose. So one of the reasons there aren't that many surviving orchestral pieces relative to, how long he was active for as a musician is because of his performing. And another reason is that he's quite a perfectionist and did a lot of revisions, and tend to put a lot of time into his pieces.
Yeah. He's had, like you said, talking about his piano works, he's got those very famous Vespers, hasn't he, for his unaccompanied choir.
Yeah,
which some people might have come across. But I'm not really aware of anything else that he did other than sort of.
So there's the 3 symphonies.
Yeah.
The 4 piano concertos. And then, I'll be honest, obviously I was doing a bit of research for this. 3 operas.
3 operas?
Did not know that. I mean, one of them was from his student days, but still, I did not know that. Rachmaninoff was born into a musical family. A lot of his relatives played instruments, not professionally, but, keenly. His mother's side of the family were actually extremely wealthy, and his father, his dad, Rachmaninoff writes later in his life, lots of negative things about his dad, actually. So even though his mother's side of the family were pretty wealthy, his parents married pretty well off. According to Rachmaninoff anyway, his father had gambled away quite a lot of it. Right. So, it's certainly not like money was no object for them. And in the first part of his career, struggling for money is one of the things that keeps coming up with Rachmaninoff's accounts of things.
Yeah.
So,
that's interesting.
So he began to learn the piano at the age of 4 and enrolled at the Moscow Conservatory of Music at age 13, where he stayed for many years, focusing on the piano. And it's interesting that he actually fell out with a few teachers there who wanted him to focus more on the piano, whereas he was always really, really interested in composing and writing his own music, whereas they just wanted to get him back on the piano. Like, no, focus on the piano. That's your thing.
Yeah.
So after graduating, he got a small contract for publishing piano pieces, and this is where a lot of his piano works come from, studies and things like that. And he gave piano recitals professionally and taught the piano, a lot of piano lessons. So this is one of the first stages of his life as a student, and the years straight after that, starting to make his way as a musician.
It's interesting. I think the number of people who have to become teachers first with it. Do you think? But the idea of Rachmaninoff, who's an amazing pianist, an amazing performer, amazing composer, sort of having, I'm sure they probably weren't just average pupils, but it just seems a little bit strange to me. And I know sometimes, what you mean, but do you not think you forget sometimes as well, because you hear a big name, because they've got such famous pieces, you sort of think, well, they didn't need to do anything else in their life. But of course, actually, to be financially secure with anything, they needed to, try and make ends meet in lots of different ways.
Yeah, but they all did, didn't they? Like Mozart, Beethoven, when they were working for aristocracy and stuff, they were always teaching the
Yeah.
Yeah, and like Rossini as well. I'm pretty sure Rossini retired really, really, really young, like had a huge career in his 20s and then retired young and just kind of swanned around for the rest of his life. But he did in that period teach the piano and singing, I think, to wealthy people because he was such a big name. He could charge a lot for his lessons, and rich people wanted to learn with the famous Rossini. So yeah, everyone's done it.
Yeah, interesting.
It's one of those things I never really planned on doing and kind of fell into because it's just a natural thing for musicians to do because you've got the skills to do it and hopefully relay it to somebody else. But actually, I genuinely really love it. Like, I wouldn't want to not do it, I don't think.
Yeah, good. Well, look, I hate Rachmaninoff did as well. Sometimes it feels
and hopefully you, given you're a teacher.
A necessary evil. Yeah, of course. But that's, I'm not doing it because I need to as a musician. I'm doing it because I can't be a musician. It's a subtle yet important distinction.
Not true. It's not true. So moving on, the next period of Rachmaninoff's life career that we're going to talk about is the one surrounding his first symphony. So in 1893, Tchaikovsky died. And Rachmaninoff was a huge, huge fan of Tchaikovsky, and the death of Tchaikovsky actually affected him really negatively.
As should we all be, by the way, Tchaikovsky.
Fantastic composer. A few famous pieces by Tchaikovsky, Joe. Throw them out.
Swan Lake, Nutcracker, the Valleys, Symphony, Four Focuses especially. Eugene Onegin, wonderful, wonderful composer.
Yeah. I'm conducting I don't know if I told you, the Tchaik violin concerto next month.
Wonderful piece. Piece. That is good.
Yeah.
That is good.
You can come if you want.
Yeah, we can come back to that.
So the death of Tchaikovsky, who a lot of his early compositions are based on his style, really, really affected him. And for a long, long time, he just lacked the inspiration to compose anything at all because of this. After a lot of work on it, his first symphony was premiered in 1895. And have you heard anything about this before?
No.
It did not go well. So the critics, most notably César Cui, big name of the time.
Oh, one of the five, one of the Russian five, yeah?
Yeah, one of the mighty five.
Yeah.
Really laid into it, didn't like it at all. And I actually know that piece. I really like it. I think it's great. One of the big reasons behind the premiere being a disaster was, again, according to accounts at the time, it was very poorly rehearsed and conducted by another big name at the time, Glazunov.
Okay, yes, I do know him as well. That's interesting. Am I right in saying perhaps not too uncommon?
So I don't know how much firm evidence there is for this, but we're led to believe that Glazunov had an alcohol problem, and people at the time say he was drunk for rehearsals / even the concert, and it was just a disaster, which is a shame when you've put all of this work into a piece and then the bit that's out of your control doesn't go well.
Yeah.
But yeah, this, after the death of Tchaikovsky as well, really, really, really had a big impact on him, and he fell into a depression for 3 years. So he fell into a depression for 3 years, having put all of this time and energy into this first symphony, and then it was so poorly received, it was never performed again for the rest of his life.
Wow.
And in these 3 years, he composed almost nothing. He gave piano lessons, and actually this is the period where he started conducting just for need of money.
Yeah. Okay.
The next period that we're going to call the recovery period, we're going to say started in
Is that we are now designating ourselves to give the titles for Rachmaninoff's sections of life? I like it. Good.
So some could call it the recovery period if they wanted to. Listen, if you want to use these names, go ahead.
Someone's got to name it. Why not us?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 1900, he actually started getting therapy, including hypnotherapy, a lot of counselling, because friends and family were concerned about his mental well-being. Really, really, really bad depression because of the, like I said, the first symphony and the death of Tchaikovsky, and probably other things as well, psychological problems. But This ended up helping a lot. And in 1901, he wrote, mentioned it earlier, his second piano concerto.
Yeah. And this is a big one, isn't it? In terms of, for those of you who've seen the brilliant film Brief Encounter,
Yeah,
the music to that film is all Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto.
it's such a good piece.
Yeah, and that's not all it's used for at all, but that's just quite a famous one. Amazing piece. So he'd written his first one, maybe about the same time as his first symphony.
His first piano concerto was 1891, so from the student period, so early work.
Early work and pre-death of Tchaikovsky.
Yeah, absolutely.
Depression and everything. Okay, and then we have, So his second piano concerto, which of course isn't the piece we're even talking about, that was 1901.
That was 1901. And later, it actually won the Glinka Award and a big cash prize for Rachmaninoff. It was very well received, very popular, as it is today. And this certainly helped, lift his spirits surrounding composition and helped with his confidence as well, because one of the things he suffered from was self-confidence when it came to symphonic writing. Like he knew he was a good pianist, obviously, and he knew he could write for the piano. But when it came to the orchestra, certainly in this period and in his earlier days, not so confident.
But you wouldn't
be
a lot if you get reviews from Kui, or however you want to say him. He's one of those
big names of the day.
Yeah, interesting.
So speaking of the second piano concerto, I'm actually going to leave a couple of links in the description again on YouTube. So I'll obviously link to the Second Symphony, which we'll get to talking about at some point, maybe one day. I think I'll leave a link to the second piano concerto as well. So any of the pieces we're talking about, I will link in the description. If you hear us mention something like what is that? I don't know that. Absolutely fine. Like I say, Joe doesn't even know the piece that they're talking about today. But I would put a link to a recording of that in the description for you to have a look at. Okay, so by 1904, his conducting had picked up to the point that he was appointed conductor of the Bolshoi Theatre, very, very famous theatre. So he was kind of a big deal conducting-wise by this time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff to do with the political events in Russia around about this time or a bit later, leading to, the revolution that we absolutely don't have time to go into today, unfortunately. But it still played a big enough part in Rachmaninoff's life that Rachmaninoff eventually had to emigrate to America because of the political turmoil. So in 1918, he left for America, and by this stage, his reputation as a musician was so big that in New York, the ship that he was arriving on, there was a crowd waiting for it, to greet him.
Wow.
Because he was that well known, that big a deal.
That's quite cool, isn't it? It is 1918. There's still the people waiting. That's wow. That's very cool.
And I know we skipped on quite a few years there, and we're going to skip on a lot more now. So he lived for the rest of his life in America. A lot of touring, a lot of piano playing, a lot of conducting, trying to find time for composing, always trying to get that balance right, but always wishing he was doing more composing.
Sorry, am I right in saying his time in America included a dinner with Igor Stravinsky, who I believe was also living in America, another Russian composer who's completely different in style to Rachmaninoff?
I have not heard this, but feel free to jump into it. So Stravinsky definitely did live in America. I think he lived in LA.
Yeah. Apparently they, because obviously huge music names, very different styles. Yeah. And there's a great story of them having dinner where apparently music wasn't even talked about.
Nice.
Yeah. I quite like that.
Yeah, fair enough. So anyway, 1 year before his death, he was actually granted American citizenship. So the last part of his life, big part of his life, working life as well, he spent in America.
Nice.
Okay, so Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony. So he wrote it between 1906 to 1907, and it was premiered in St. Petersburg in 1908 with, by this time, the composer conducting, because his conducting career had, picked up by this point that he could conduct his own works. No more drunk Glazunov giving his premieres.
No. And I suppose as well, by this time, he'd not only got that reputation as a conductor, but given the success of his second piano concerto, they're probably more enthusiastic reception, even, well, before it's even happened, right? People would have been quite excited by this piece.
Yeah, definitely. So the score is dedicated to, please jump in and tell us if we're mispronouncing this, Taneyev, who is a name I've only ever seen written down. I've never heard anybody say it out loud before. Who was
until now,
Rachmaninoff's.
Until it's us. Yeah,
that's it. Pioneers. So he was a teacher of Rachmaninoff's at the conservatory, and he himself studied with Tchaikovsky. So it was a direct link to Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff's idol, and that's who this piece is dedicated to. So at the time of this composition being written, Rachmaninoff was enjoying a lot of success as a conductor, but as with the rest of his life, not really finding as much time to compose. And so he moved, for this reason, even though he was doing really well as a conductor, he moved to Germany, Dresden. Yeah. So his confidence still shaken by the disaster of the First Symphony. He wasn't sure about his Second Symphony, even, as you said, with the success of his Second Piano Concerto, yet still really, really, really conscious about it and his own symphonic writing. So the first draft he really, really wasn't happy with, and so he made a lot of revisions over several months to try and improve it.
Okay.
But the symphony was a success and earned him another Glinka Award and big cash prize, which helped to restore his faith in himself and his self-belief. So this is a really big piece, kind of like a pivotal moment in his life, because this is, the kind of, I can do it kind of moment.
Yeah. Okay.
So one of the reasons you might recognize it is that the third movement was borrowed by Eric Carmen for his song Never Gonna Fall in Love Again. I don't know if you're familiar with that. You'll have heard it in adverts and, like on the radio and whatnot. But yeah, same tune, same opening tune. Eric Carmen also, the really, really famous one that you will know, All By Myself. Yeah.
Is it the same writer?
Yeah, Eric Carmen. So, this was the same guy who wrote All By Myself, which I just thought it was, like a rumor, like, that's funny. It kind of sounds a bit like Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto, doesn't it? But no, it's
the verse,
really
not the chorus. Yeah. Not that.
Yeah.
Not that bit. Yeah.
No, the other bit. Really, really, really similar harmonies. But no, it turns out that Eric Carmen was actually contacted by the Rachmaninoff estate and made to pay royalties for both this and Never Gonna Fall in Love Again. And Eric Carmen said that he didn't realize they were still in copyright. So he had actually just nicked and fancied it.
I do believe he thought that. Is it 75 years after a composer's death?
Yeah. Well, It depends what country you're in. It's 70 in this country.
Okay. But yeah, that's interesting. He didn't realise.
Yeah,
Good tunes to pick.
This was the 70s that Eric Carmen was writing this.
Yeah.
But anyway, for that reason, I reckon you'll have just heard Never Gonna Fall in Love Again out and about. And I think when you hear the third movement, you'll recognise it just through that.
Yeah, like that.
Okay, so on to the music. Rachmaninoff's music in general is characterised by flexible rhythms, sweeping lyricism to big, long tunes. Also, he had a particular interest in Gregorian chant and the Dies Irae, from
Dies Irae is part of a requiem. You have Dies
Irae. That's it. Yeah. So
I'm not sure what that is.
That particular motif makes his way into a lot of pieces, including this one. So it's woven in all the way through. So that's a little thing to listen out for.
Well, I hope he paid royalties for it, because, to be honest, his estate wanted the other way around. Before. Yeah, he can't have his cake and eat it too, can he?
Yeah. Nobody likes a hypocrite.
Mm.
So this piece is in 4 movements. How would you, for people who don't listen to a lot of classical music, which I know a lot of my friends don't, who probably will make up a big part of the audience for this podcast, how would you describe a movement? Something's in movements.
I suppose the obvious thing is it is a section of a piece, isn't it? So if you were to say it's, traditionally you'd have 3 movements and it'd be a fast, slow, then a fast. But then people mix it up a lot more, and symphonies tend to now have 4 movements, don't they? And it's normally tends to be quite quick, then a much slower one, and then maybe something like a scherzo, which is
or a minuet,
a joke, and then the finale, a movement like that. And I suppose as well, just a point on this, is probably linked to the idea that still, if this is 1908, I know we're at the advent of the gramophone, aren't we? But still, really, music like that was an event, wasn't it, to go and see? And I always think that's part of classical music. And you see, if you go and see a piece like this Second Symphony, which lasts an hour, you want your money's worth, don't you? And we're talking about the bourgeoisie and upper classes who are going to see this. They didn't want to see a symphony that lasts 10 minutes or 5 minutes. And so I think that's always a big part of it. And that's why I think they then become these separate movements. So it's almost like after one movement, you take a moment's breath.
Absolutely. Okay. So this piece is, in a somewhat traditional form in that it's 4 movements. So the first, it's really long as well. It's not too long. I like I say, I love this piece. It's an hour long, to the point where there were revisions done at later points to make shorter versions, or quite often he's put in, for a whole section to be repeated in the first movement, and quite often people could leave that out, the exposition in the first movement. But onto the music, the first movement starts with the slow introduction that I talked about earlier. It's amazing. Listen to it. It's so hard to describe it in words. It's just kind of ominous, brooding, lots of suspense and tension. Starts in E minor, which is the key of this symphony. And then this leads us into a sonata form movement, which we're not going to go into the whole depths of sonata form now. But basically, in sonata form, we have 2 themes, and then they get played about with, and then they come back later. So that's the kind of thing that we have in this first movement, which builds up with a big fast section after the slow introduction towards a big frantic end. The second movement, so sometimes, how we said you'd have a second movement that's a slow movement, and then a third movement that might be a scherzo or a minuet. Quite often composers, after a while, might swap them around, put them in a different order. So here we have a fast movement, shorter movement, sort of in place of a scherzo. It's not a scherzo. It's in 2 time for 1. So we're in A minor, and it starts off with really fast ostinatos, repeating patterns, and the Dies Irae theme in the horns. But this disappears into a really slow, lush theme, like a lot of contrast. At the end of the movement, a brass choir, like a brass chorale, gives us the Dies Irae theme, and then the whole thing just disappears into a very quiet nothing. But then we have the third movement, which is the famous one from it, like the most well-known movement.
Okay.
This is the slow movement, and actually the most well-known theme from it, I think, is the intro theme. So you have an introduction where you get this amazing theme that you'll 100% recognize. Like, listen to it. Like, click the link I've put in the description. Have a listen to it. There'll be timestamps in that as well, so you can skip on to the third movement of the recording I've chosen. It's so amazing. I absolutely love it. Just the harmonies, the melody, so and the writing for the strings.
This is genuine enthusiasm from you, and it's lovely. And
it's rare, isn't it, when it comes to? I don't want to say I'm being jaded.
Little boy again, and I love it. And it's making me listen to it.
Honestly, because count myself as very lucky that music's my job. Sometimes it is a job, and you have to do pieces where you think you're not really thinking about emotions. It's just like the nuts and bolts of what's going on.
You've conducted with a DJ before.
A DJ and a beatboxer, so
Yeah.
no biggie.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes you're just thinking about the nuts and bolts and like, how is this piece put together? How am I going to,
Sure.
or how are we as an orchestra going to put it on, iron out the creases, etc., etc. With this, I don't think of it at all. It literally just kind of just fills me with emotions straight away. It's so great. I know this sounds like kind of waffling without a specific reason for why I like it, but I mean, I love Russian music in general, and so a lot of the harmonies, the kind of harmonies you only get in Russian music. Again, back to the Tchaikovsky connection we were talking about before.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's such a good
minor keys, isn't it? Yeah, glorious.
Yeah, and just some of the added notes that they put into normal 3-note chords.
Lovely.
Okay, and then the fourth movement, again, sonata form. We're into E major, so we've come to the tonic major. It is a fast movement, and the Dies Irae theme plays a prominent role again. He also throws in interjections of themes from early movements as well, just harking back to things earlier in the symphony, which is quite interesting. And then right at the end, I don't know if you've noticed this, but quite a lot of his pieces end with 4 notes that some people tend to call the Rachmaninoff kind of theme, because quite often it's like a rhythm like da 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 down or da 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 down. So people are like Rachmaninoff. That's a thing. Have you heard that before?
Right. So people are saying that he's saying his name almost in it.
I don't know if people are actually saying that, but it's like, it ends with Rachmaninoff. So quite a lot of his pieces do that. Yeah. Again, whether he's putting that in or whether people are just kind of assigning that to it after the fact might be more likely. But this ends with the triplets. So da 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 at the end. Really cool ending.
Rachmaninoff.
That's about all I've got to say on the music. Anything you want to add or ask?
No, I find it very, very interesting. I didn't realize he was so low in confidence in his own ability with symphonic writing, because he's such a huge name now, I would say.
Yeah.
And so popular. And I think some of his work, I mean, we didn't mention Rhapsody on the Theme of Paganini, which is another very famous piece of his.
Yeah, for piano and orchestra, great piece.
Yeah, I think, like you said, a lot of people who aren't necessarily into classical music would recognise his work, which I often think. Do you not think that's often quite a sort of indication that they're very, very good and very, very popular?
You made it when you're used in a Crisps advert.
If you're used in a Noel Coward film, I think that's what Brief Encounter is. You certainly made it.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. I get what you're saying. And not just today, but by the almost like second half of his life, he was a big deal, very well known, very famous musician. And it's just interesting, the comparison between that and the real low points in his life earlier on.
Yeah. I think that's the theme as well, isn't it? It can be that composers, artists in general, it's like the tortured artist, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so on to my remix that I've done of this. Have you listened to the remix, the dance music remix I've done of the third movement?
Now, I wonder, I might be the only person in the world so far who's listened to the remix of a Rachmaninoff symphony before I've listened to the Rachmaninoff symphony itself. And I have to say, I really, really like it. What I'm intrigued to know now is the themes that you've used in this remix. There are several things I wanted to ask, actually. Firstly, the main theme you use, is that the theme from the third movement that you seem to love so much?
Yeah, right. So I forgot to mention, or I went off on a tangent when we were talking about the third movement. So the introductory theme isn't actually the main theme. So you have this introductory theme, which is the really, really well-known one. And then you get a clarinet theme, which is actually the first main theme. And then you get a minor theme later on.
Yeah.
So the two that I've used were the introductory theme, the famous one, and then the minor theme later on. I've not done the clarinet bit. Sorry to any big clarinet fans out there.
They get enough. Clarinets get a lot of solos and a lot,
Mozart clarinet concerto.
Yeah, and it's also, they effectively learn two instruments for the price of one, because the saxophone is, I'm going to offend a lot of people here, and so it's basically the same thing. So,
Wow. Same fingering as the flute, the saxophone. Did you know that?
No, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I actually think you won't be the only person who's done it that way around, because obviously I can see YouTube analytics and stuff like that. So the remixes that I've done of classical pieces, thankfully, quite a few people have listened to them, which is very nice. Mm-hmm. But quite a lot of people would have come to or I can see that they have in the analytics, will have come to the Rachmaninoff one through having listened to, Paco Belcanon or Rondo alla Turca or something really, really, really well known first, and then gone, oh, what else has this guy done? Oh, Rachmaninoff, who's this? Okay, and then clicked on that. So I don't think you'll be the only person I think most people who've heard that remix probably won't have heard the original one.
But would you see that I might be the first?
Possibly. But so this was actually the first remix I did.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew that. So it was about this time last year, actually. I started producing and did some original songs that did okay, I guess. And then I thought it'd be fun. I was like, why don't I do a remix of some classical music? That sounds quite a fun thing to do. And it was really, really fun, obviously still is. But instantly, it just did so much better than my original stuff.
Interesting, isn't it? It's interesting with that. And of course, you knew, unlike others, that Rachmaninoff was now out of copyright.
By the time I came to do it. Sorry, Carmen.
Yeah, exactly. Can I ask another question about your piece? The rhythms you use at the start, are they taken from the symphony as well?
Which ones? In the melody or in the chords?
No, in the chords.
No. So the chords in the original are, I think they're all just on the beat in this first section.
That's a shame, because I really like that in the remix.
Right. So I put them on the beat, and because it's quite slow, quite sparse, or what I did with it was quite sparse and not much going on, I kind of thought, what I've done here sounds a bit dull. Not Rachmaninoff's thing sounds dull, because it doesn't. It's amazing. It's such a good piece. But what I did with it sounded dull. So I was like, how can I make this interesting? Oh, what if I move some of these chords off the beat a bit? That might give it a bit of something else. But you liked that.
So what you're saying is that you've improved Rachmaninoff in your first attempt at a remix.
Well, obviously not.
It's not for you to say, is it? Let others, let's see what they say. That's a shame, in the sense of, I think that works really, really well. And it's interesting, the harmonies. But I also think one of the reasons I really like that is because hearing those sorts of harmonies in that rhythm is a bit unusual, because it wouldn't really be done, would it, by a composer of that time. But I do think that works very well, I have to say.
Thanks. A lot of the harmonies I have tried to keep the same. There's some I've changed just to make them more kind of, appropriate for dance music.
Yeah.
Like some things just don't fit, and so I've just put a few more dance music chords. But a lot of the harmonies are.
Sorry, I was just going to say what I think is really interesting with your remixes, and this is probably a good example. Nobody ever goes to listen to a symphony with the intention of dancing, even if something is a minuet, which is a dance, really, isn't it? No one's got that
Certainly
in mind.
Is.
But it is really interesting how well I think your remixes work as dance music, don't they?
Oh, thanks, appreciate that. So actually, to be fair, when I listened back to this one, because this was the first one I did about a year ago, and I know a year is not that long relatively, but I've been producing for about 2 years, so like in the context of that, it's a long time. So actually, when I listen back to this, like there's bits that I like, but there's a lot that I kind of cringe about. It's like, because there's a lot that I do, I think. Now
that's part of being a content creator, though, isn't it? I mean, like look at Rachmaninoff. He must have felt the same with his first symphony.
If Rachmaninoff were a YouTube content creator,
but
there is that thing that, like, if it's like an old cliche that if you don't look back at what you were doing 6 months ago, content wise, and kind of think it's a bit then you're not improving enough.
There you go. It's great though, isn't it? I genuinely give the remix a listen to. And something else that's got going for it is it's about 3.5 minutes long, isn't it? And if you haven't got the hour to spare for the entire Rachmaninoff Symphony.
But if you do have the hour to spare, I would recommend listening to the whole thing, the whole of the Rachmaninoff Symphony, because like we talked about, a lot of the movements are interrelated, and so you really get the sense of progression from one to the other, like it's one long big journey.
Yeah,
it starts off so dark and somber, and then just ends big fanfares and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I'll leave a link to my remix in the description as well. You know what? Maybe the outro music for a podcast, maybe for this episode, I'll actually play some of that instead of the usual jingle.
That's a really good idea. You know,
nice.
You would do one, and that'll be good. That will be good.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for joining us. This is the first one we've done of these, so learning a lot about what kind of information to include and stuff like that, what kind of tone to go for. I've enjoyed it, having a beer, talking about Rachmaninoff. What about you?
I certainly have. Well, I've learned loads. It's been great for me because I've not been leading this one, have I? So I didn't know most of those things about Sergei. So
true. But next time, I'm very much looking forward to whatever you're going to be talking us through.
Yeah. Are we going to give them a taste, or are we going to just wait and see?
It's up to you. It's your thing.
Okay, so my one is going to be Für Elise or Für Elisa in German, I believe.
Nice.
Which is a very famous tune. I can't believe there's anyone who hasn't heard that. Composed by the wonderful Ludwig van Beethoven.
That was a big famous tune. Looking forward to that.
Straight in with the big guns.
That's it. Looking forward to that. And on that note, I've actually got to go to football, like literally now. So thank you very much for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.